just wanted to thank everybody for making the time to, attend this webinar. We're really excited now that, we're in full swing of bell season, and excited to hear, what's different for 2021, and to get some feedback from both entrants and past judges about what makes a successful bells entry. So, this is part of the PR Club's ongoing program session. So feel free to visit us at prclub.org to see what other programs we have coming up. And yeah, I'll kick it over to Amy to, kind of kick things off.
Great. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Jen and I are here representing the full team of Bellringer Awards Committee members. There's a bunch of us behind the scenes who are working together to make this work. So first, I'll introduce my co-host today, who is Jen Underhill. And Jen and I work together at Boston University. Jen, you can go to the next.
Yeah. Getting there.
We work together at Boston University, and but here we are to focus on the bells today. More important than us, however, are our panelists. We have 3 exceptional PR practitioners here today to talk to you about their experiences, some as an entrant, some as a judge, and some as both. And so we're going to let them do a lot of the talking when it comes to really going through some of the entries that we've seen and talking about tips and best practices moving forward. But what we thought we'd do is just give you an overview. If we can go to the next slide, our hope is, as we continue to evolve the Bellringers, that we bring you along with us, and that you can walk away from this session with some clear guidance, as Erin said, about what's new in 2021, but also to really think about how do we use the entry process to our benefit to be able to best showcase and highlight your work for our judges. And so by giving you some insight into the mindset of what our judges are looking for, our scoring process, and how that translates into awards, we hope that you'll feel more confident submitting your work for review, and then we hope celebration later on in the season. So Jen, what's new in 2021?
Well, I'm glad you asked. So new year, new things are happening. We're always trying to make the Bellringers topical and timely for everybody. So this year, one of the things that we've incorporated is a timeline of events. So normally what we usually do is we ask people to submit things with only a 1-year eligibility. However, this year, given that it's kind of a different year for everyone and everyone had to adapt to different things, we're asking or allowing everyone to incorporate work they've done in the past year or previous years as part of this year's entrance. But the really cool thing that we're totally excited about is this new winner showcase. And so basically what it is, it's for highlighting the showcase. We're highlighting the winners and showcasing all of the work. So all of the entries will be incorporated into a winners gallery. One thing we will ask you to make sure is that you have and secure client approval for any confidential information or sensitive information that maybe shouldn't be incorporated either in your submission, but also to the public should be put your winning entry on display. The other cool thing is we have a featured image. So you can make the creative the better, put a little image of either your campaign, maybe your team, something like that. Just keep in mind that it is in thumbnail size. So when you're putting it together, either a single image or a compilation of images, just keep in mind the size factor as you go through. The showcase summary will also include a 150-word summary of your campaign, so you can highlight and maybe find a fun tagline or slogan to go with it if you were to win. And then obviously a social media friendly logo will ask you to incorporate that so that the PR Club can promote all of your hard work and winning entries on our social media as we go forward.
One thing I'll just add, Jen, to that social media logo is sometimes it's hard for us on the Bells Committee to know who should get that one logo, right? Sometimes you'll have the agency logo and the client logo, and we're not sure which one you want used, which is why we're asking you to really specify for social media. So sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, that's okay. Thanks for clearing and adding that little tidbit. So one thing we do want to hit home, and I mentioned it earlier in the slide, is that we are putting this on the showcase. And so we will want you to get client approval. So what we did is when you go through your entry submission, you'll see a little checkbox, and it's located within the pile or grouping of all the winner showcase information that we'll ask you. And it just kind of says here, please let us know if there's things in here that we shouldn't include, or if we need to redact some of your entry. And so by checking off this box, it just shows that we only want certain information available, and you'll see the submission title, showcase, and the summary included. So just keep that in mind when you're filling out your entry form. So Amy, you want to talk about scoring?
I sure would. I know we get a lot of questions sometimes when we're going through either sometimes the award ceremony or right after. People ask, how does this actually get judged? And so what we'll start with is just the actual scoring itself. You can see here there's a lot of content on the slide, but we break down, first of all, this is judged by multiple people. So Jen is actually recruiting, well, she's recruited more than 60 judges this year. These are New England area PR professionals who have had at least 10 years of experience in the industry. And they have applied to be a judge. They have been vetted by Jen and our committee, and then they're incorporated into our this judging community. Judges are assigned multiple categories. So this allows them to double up. So judging some category or most categories will be judged by 3 or ideally 4 judges. So it's not just one person who's in there. We also put a lot of thought into ensuring that there are no conflicts of interest when we assign the judges. And we also make sure that the judge's experience is qualified to judge that category. So I don't want to tell you, we don't need to go into how the judging process is made beyond that, but just know there's a lot of hard work and thought that goes into it. And that really ensures the credibility of the awards and the scoring themselves. So the judging form looks very similar to what you're seeing here. They're going to break down your entry narrative and award points based on how effective you were at communicating certain aspects of the program. Now on our entry guidelines and on the PR Club website, there are a lot of details in here, but we're looking at things like, clarity. Have you really explained the situation? Did you cover all of the context that we have or that we're looking for so that we can understand the purpose of doing this work? Your objectives, we're looking for smart, specific, realistic, relevant, and time-bound objectives. We don't want something that's like, oh, we just want to gain awareness. Okay, well, what does that really mean? So we're really looking, the judges are looking for specificity there. For program planning and strategy, we really want to understand how did you arrive at where you are and how well did you explain all of the different elements that you drew on to bring this work to life. For the results, obviously you can see this is weighted more because this is it. Did it work or did it not? And for that, we're looking at how well your results achieved those objectives. And we're also looking for some intangible results, maybe some anecdotal feedback on top of that, not instead of. So that's, those main elements of the entry narrative. And then we'll provide an overall quality score here. And I've given you some examples of the questions that the judges are asked in terms of their ability to convey the information, how detailed was it, did they follow the guidelines for the particular category. So we're going to, I hope that gives you a sense of how seriously we take this and how we break down that judging process. Jen, over to you.
Sure. So we kind of took a scholarly approach to our level of awards. So over the years, we've gotten feedback from applicants and winners saying, okay, well, what does each category mean? Like, we got a bronze belt, what does that mean? So basically we wanted to break it down a little bit for everyone and kind of, we don't want to give all of our secrets away, but we wanted to give people a little bit of an idea kind of how we rate it, or how the judges rated, I'm sorry. So obviously we'll start off at the top. The gold bell is the penultimate, and what I hope everyone's trying to achieve. And that's kind of what we would give an A+ ranking, right? So it's the one that's kind of it scores 100, it goes well above and beyond all of your checkpoints on your rubric, and go that way. The Silver Bell will give you an A. You did a great job. Maybe there's some components that are missing, or maybe you're a little bit off target, but overall it's still a great job. For the Bronze, it's what we would consider A- work. Again, still great, maybe a few more components are missing, could have expanded a little bit further, this, that, and the other, however the judges see fit. And so that's maybe kind of like an A-. And then obviously for merit, it's a B+. Maybe you hit the target, but it could have moved a little bit over, just to bring it a step up. But again, everyone's great work. It's just a little bit kind of how we determine it for there.
One thing I think we need to mention about the levels, I know we get questions at the award ceremony, how come there was only a bronze awarded in this? Why didn't that automatically get the gold? And it's because the entry itself has to reach that threshold that Jen mentioned. So if we don't have a gold level entrant, we just won't award a gold in that category. So that's why sometimes you'll see maybe the top scoring bell would be a silver, or maybe even a merit in that category. Something else that we wanted to share with you are our professional awards. And this is actually another new feature this year, not that we have professional awards, but how we are administering the professional awards this year. First, they're open now. Open with the regular call for entry, but the deadline is a little bit later. We're going to go through, I think it's August 16th, not August, oh my goodness, April 16th for our deadline. So you've got some time to think about it. But what's new this year is that PR Club members can nominate candidates for the Striker and the Ringer Award for free. We think this is a great way in a really difficult year to be able to honor and recognize your peers, your colleagues, your supervisors, and really just help, create some good community amongst yourselves. The Crystal Bell is always free for anybody, members and non-members, so there's no change there. And then the fee for Striker and Ringer for non-members, that's been reduced a little bit this year in recognition of, we know the challenges that a lot of organizations are facing right now. So we really encourage you don't have to pick favorites because you don't have to worry about budget. So think about that new entrant to the field or that mid-level practitioner that you think is just knocking it out of the park. Maybe it's you, and maybe you want to talk to your supervisor about working on that kind of nomination. But we really hope you'll take advantage of that opportunity. And the Crystal Bell. This is that Lifetime Achievement Award. We're really looking for stellar applications, people who have been able to demonstrate a commitment not only to the industry, but to the community at large, who really made a lasting impact here in New England. So we hope you'll take advantage of that. Just to keep following along, here are the deadlines. Everything's on our website, everything's on the Bell Ringer entrant page, but just to give you a sense, the reason why we have an early bird deadline, I know it seems like, gosh, do we really need to do this that quickly? But there is a price discount if you get it in early. So if budget is an issue, definitely urge you to think about that deadline. Our regular deadline, as you can see, is in the middle of March, and we then allow an extra week for the late deadline, but there is a charge it's $100 per award entrant during that late fee. So that can really add up. So definitely urge you to get it in before that regular deadline. And then again, the professional award deadline, as we talked about. So thank you for going through all of the housekeeping and the logistics with us. And I'm going to turn it over to Jen now because we're going to switch gears.
Yeah, so we're going to get into the meat and potatoes and what I know everyone's eager here to see. So we're going to talk a little bit about what is that gold submission look like, or what does a bronze or silver to, anything really. What makes them award-winning for whatever level that you guys get. So this is where we're going to call on our three panelists, Rob, Meredith, Rissa. Thank you so much for joining. So we're going to jump right in, and we're going to talk about the single item 2020 Bronze Bell Media Placement Trade and Vertical winner, which was awarded to Meredith at Red Lorry, Yellow Lorry for From Times Square to a Top Campaign of the Year. What we'll do, I think, is I have the deck of the award-winning entries, so we're kind of going to go in and if you guys want to talk about it as a panelist, and then we'll go back to the judges' feedback. So let's dive in. So this was the campaign, and I'll give you guys a moment to read, or Meredith, if you want to provide some commentary, go for it.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Jen.
Yeah.
So this is a client of ours that is in kind of the media and entertainment space. They're an advertising agency actually for Broadway shows, live events, things like that. So, you know, the Met is one of their clients, and lots of Broadway shows from Kinky Boots to Wicked and everything. Very fun. So, you know, I think this is very relatable, a very relatable campaign for all of our PR practitioners, because so often when we PR a great campaign for our clients, the goal is for the client to get all of the recognition, right? You know, our names are left out of it. We might have ghostwritten that byline, or we may have, you know, secured that great Forbes piece, but, you know, nobody in the wider public sphere knows that. So that's kind of what AKA as an advertising agency has to battle too. They need to attract advertising clients and advertising executives, but all the wonderful Broadway shows and everything that they do, you know, the show gets the credit, not them. So they face a really uphill battle in some of that, and as do we as their PR agency. So on the next slide, you know, for instance, you can see that one of their big advertising initiatives was Harry Potter and the Cursed Child going onto Broadway. I am a huge Harry Potter fan, so I was very excited about this one. And this was really cool. They actually got like 8 different vendors together to take over all 51 screens in Times Square, and it was just amazing. So imagine like, okay, Sarah Jessica Parker was also there, and she like lit up. Yeah, I think there's an image of her.
Yeah.
Yeah, there she is. So like she's got a wand, and so imagine her like starting the thing, and then the spell going around and around Times Square and all the screens, and then like the dark mark appearing and very ominous music. It was very cool. Anyway, but what happened was Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, the producers of that play didn't want AKA or us to be pitching that story about all the integration and the coordination that went to pulling off this huge advertising stunt. So hundreds of pieces of coverage came out, and our client AKA wasn't mentioned in a single one. So we really tried to draw out that challenge and that story in our submission to make it, you know, relatable to all our judges who have no doubt been there, but it's also a story. It's a fun story to tell. So it's an engaging story here that we've tried to create. You know, months later after the debut of this Broadway show, we actually did finally get agreement to pitch it. We had a short window. We had like one shot to do this. So that's why this is in the single media category placement. And about this award entry, you know, AKA is an advertising agency. So their top media targets are like the Ad Weeks or the Ad Ages of the world. When we were putting this submission together, we thought, oh, does this really have a shot? I mean, other agencies are going to put up, you know, Good Morning America as a single hit, or, you know, this Wall Street Journal front page feature. And we thought, does our little Ad Week, you know, Broadway client even stand a chance? But we're glad we did. We put it together. And let's see, I think on the next slide, oh, you can see the dark mark on all the screens there. That was really cool. Yeah, here we get into the results. So we got this amazing Ad Week feature, all about the immersive experience that they created. We got this new angle about it, so that it would differentiate from the hundreds of other pieces of coverage. And then, you know, we reached out to the editor who wrote this, David Greiner, and he said it received a great response from their readers. Okay, we'll take what we can get. Not super specific, thanks, David, but hey, we'll take it. Luckily, we had a bunch of other numbers to back up these results too. So on the next slide, this was all about matching to their objectives. So one was breaking out of the Broadway bubble into the advertising trades. That's their main audience. Highlighting the interactiveness of the campaign. And then the last 3 bullets here, you can see we actually got some hard numbers. So share of voice metrics, impressions metrics, and engagements on social media in comparison to typical coverage that they get. So all really, really strong numbers. But I think as a judge too, one of the most important things that I always look for is that the objectives you lay out match the results. So I think we'll go into this a little bit later, but if you laid out 5 objectives, I want to see 5 results that map to those objectives, whether you hit them or not. So that's what we were able to showcase here. And I think you know, fingers crossed, we were like, oh, maybe this could stand a chance against Good Morning America coverage or whatever it was. But in the end of it, we did win a bronze medal for this. And the bronze medal was the top award for this category. So no one received gold, no one received silver. This was the top award. And I think, you know, this is some of the feedback from the judges. And actually, Risa was one of the judges judging this award. So
look at that, the irony. Yeah.
So I'll let her explain a bit about what she saw and why it kind of ranked where it did.
Right, exactly. Thank you so much. So, you know, Amy's point, I've been judging like Meredith and Rob for many years, take a lot of pride in the process. And, you know, rest assured, the club has done an exceptional job of bringing sort of like the right panel of judges together for each entrant. And we get excited to go through this process. Like, I'm excited to read the results. And this campaign was certainly no exception. It was exceptionally well executed. So sort of like reading through it, you know, the placement, the Adweek placement was impressive. The traction was impressive. And certainly, right, it's like challenging, like making that connection, finding that data. You know, you have the Adweek writer that's like, this has gotten great, you know, great interest. It's like, how do I quantify that? Because not just to submit a winning award submission, but to showcase to the client, you know, you want to be able to demonstrate this moved the needle, this impacted a behavior, this changed or influenced opinion. So we sort of get it. So I, you know, at the time, I didn't think I'd be up on a PowerPoint presenting all of this, but, you know, we provide detailed feedback in the submission when we submit our numerical rankings to the board. So this was sort of demonstrative of that. So my opinion was, I wish the results were a little bit stronger. So a little bit more showcasing that business impact. You know, again, so instead of hearing that the Adweek article, there was a great response, it would have been incredible to see more demonstrative data points that showcase, yes, and here's how, and here's what the impact looked like.
Yeah, Risa, if I could just jump in here, you
sure.
know, something like referral website traffic, right? Like
exactly.
Yeah, the agency was able to say, yeah, we saw, you know, from that particular site, it drew, you know, 500 people into our agency website, which was the top referral site of the, you know, that would have done a lot for you, right, Risa?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. That would have been, oh gosh, this is so significant. You know, yeah, and sometimes you have to work a little bit harder to get that information and to have the benchmarker to be able to get, you know, how can you make that connection with the website traffic? But I mean, that would be clutch. You know, the submission was well presented. It was a very efficient and smart presentation of information. And I think that goes a long way. You know, to Meredith's earlier point, and we sort of talked about it, it's like not every submission is necessarily going to earn the gold, right? Like not everybody gets a trophy for coming out to play, so to speak. So, you know, for the agencies that submit on behalf of a client, you know, you've been contracted, you know, to perform this service. And if you've performed well and it was well executed, that's wonderful and you've done your job. But here we're looking for that creativity, that sort of like connection, like that business impact that goes beyond, you know, job well done. And so, you know, that's why this was certainly an award-winning program, but it's sort of, you know, it's that great. And I think Jen and the rest of the board have done an exceptional job of sort of breaking that out for everyone. So you can sort of understand the context of how, you know, judges and how we're like looking very critically at each one of these submissions. Speaking of critically, you'd be surprised, or maybe you wouldn't be, at the amount of typos and industry jargon and, you know, to Meredith's earlier point, you know, here's the objective and some of the results don't tie back to the objective. And you know, you've got to take a step back and say, okay, who else on my team is reviewing the submission? Who else in the agency or who else at my company can look at this? You know, like a parent that's like never, you know, doesn't understand what you do, like read the submission. Does it make sense? Is everything laddering back? You know, are the paragraphs, are they presented in the right order? Is the information in the right order? Is it, you know, did we spell the client's name right? Believe it or not. I mean, it's very off-putting and you'd be surprised at how frequently it happens. I mean, you can get past it to an extent, but it's pretty difficult to get past it when there's, you know, paragraphs with typos and missing commas and, you know, verbose industry jargon. Like we're all communications practitioners. And, to Amy's point, many of us have been judging or been in the industry rather for at least 10 years. So we've seen a lot, right? We've seen a lot. So, you're really best served to make sure that you're reading and rereading and starting early in the process. So the club does a great job of mapping out these deadlines. Like, some do wait until a week before, and it shows every single time. You can tell when someone has thrown a submission together versus you can tell when information has been thoughtfully presented to address all of the key areas that are outlined by the club. Oh, geez. Sorry. I mean, he's loud. He's a loud guy. All right, do you want to go to the next?
Yeah, sure. So our next campaign, we wanted to show you what a gold winner is. So this is the gold bell winner for the Superior Achievement in Research and Planning. It actually was one of our super gold bell nominees. So for anyone that achieves a gold bell status, they get put into our final kind of top tier to then be up for a super bell award and be considered the top of the top golds for the year. So that's always exciting and an added incentive to really strive for that gold. So last year it went to Drizly and 360 PR Plus, establishing Drizly as a preeminent data and insights resource for the alcohol industry. And I'm going to turn the microphone over to Rob for some insight.
All right, thank you, Jennifer.
Yeah,
and yeah, apologies for the long. I think if I could critique our own entry, I would make the title shorter probably next year. It's a bit of a mouthful, but so just if you want to just flip to the next slide, just a little. I mean, you folks probably know about Drizly, right? Boston founded, Boston-based, really leader in and really originator in alcohol e-commerce and delivery. Started eight and a half years ago, and they're flying along. I mean, just you can imagine they grew at 350% during 2020. We're talking about 2019, and they were up as high as 800% in April. They turned profitable for the full year. I mean, it absolutely transformed their business. In entering 2019, which is the valid entry period here, they were growing fast. They were a little bit ahead of schedule, and really what they needed to do was they needed to double the number of retailers in their network. Drizly's a middleman, so it's a marketplace. So on one side, you're at home, you want that bottle of wine, you want it in less than an hour. So Drizly doesn't have its own inventory. It connects you to retailers in your neighborhood and even lets you price shop. So enough of the ad for Drizly, but they really, the lifeblood of their lifeblood is retailer count. The more retailers they have, the more geography they serve, and the denser they are in an established area, the better the services. So they had an audacious goal. They were at 1,000 retailers entering 2018. And by the end of 19, they needed to double that count because they knew what that would do. They had enough knowledge about the business at that point to know how it would impact, their ultimate sales and growth. So they really laid it on us. They said, look, and we represent them in all aspects, consumer, trade, and corporate. I said, guys, this is the most important thing you'll do for us this year. And so what we're really doing, and I guess my first point is we were helping them achieve a business objective. And, to us, and as an agency, we really think about that. I think, Risa did a great job saying there are tons of really good entries that get the job done, and even more than that. But the ones that really stand on top, how did we tangibly impact and demonstrably impact our client's business? And I think those are the entries that really rise to the top. And it's not just a matter of meeting a communications objective. How do we meet the business objective? Okay. So that's how we went into this, and how we approach entries really in general here. So I think it's pretty clear about the objective. We need to create an environment where retailers would take more notice and adopt the platform more rapidly. And there were some challenges. Number one, we had other players coming in. I mean, and really was a race because Amazon was making all kinds of noise, everybody in the delivery space. It's a very tough category to crack because of how regulated it is, but still a lot of folks were making noise, and we had new competition for share of voice. So that was one thing. And, secondly, we'd done a really good job, I think, to date. We'd represented them for 3 years, growing their voice within alcohol e-commerce. But in order to really break through, we needed to really make Drizly a leader in alcohol in the industry, in industry intel, to get more frequent coverage, more feature coverage, and more impactful coverage. We needed to expand their remit, and we knew they're a data machine, right? So we had the data. The question is, how could we really differentiate ourselves from some other sources? If we go to the next slide. So what we came around to on the strategies, what's a data set that we can own? And it was tough because Nielsen, right, owns retail sales writ large, right, national chains and IRI, all these long established providers. Who could we own? So what we decided was, the lifeblood of Drizly's retailers are mostly independent retailers, one store, two store ownership. There were some chains as well, but independent mom and pop shops. And what we discovered was there was no research really, or annualized research about them, their attitudes, their performance, and that's who we're talking to. So if you go to the next slide. All right, that became the idea, to establish an industry monitor for independent. What's the voice of independent retailers? What are they worried about? How are they doing? What categories of alcohol do they think are going to grow next year? What promotional methods are doing best for them? So really, and by doing this, we would actually get suppliers to become really interested as well. Those are marketing partners of Drizly too. And we would actually be able to break through, bigger to business outlets beyond trade, because again, nothing like this kind of reporter data set really existed. So the way we brought it to life was in two reports. One looking at the consumer, which actually we did earlier in the season, to almost sort of set the table for what we'd be doing later for retailers. And the retailer report came out in November, and the way we essentially positioned it as a real bona fide industry report. I mean, this is an important, and you're going to see it happen every year. So what we wanted to do too was build an equity for them. We think that's really another strong point. What did you create, right? Was anything created that has any lasting value here? Going beyond, and one-offs could be great, and distinct campaigns could be great, but are we building any longer-term value? And I think here is an instance where we were helping our client do that. So ultimately, we developed all these storylines. What are different generations coming in and buying, and what are they interested in? What kind of questions do they ask when they walk into the store? Hard seltzer was just about happening in that summer, so we got all over it and asked a real big suite about, how much floor space are you going to devote next year to that category? Do you think it's a flash in the pan? And so we were reaching into a topic that had become huge across all verticals. We were able to do that. And, in the consumer report, we were really able to look at, who the consumer was and what they were looking for as we went forward. And then the retailer report itself, which followed a few months later in November, was all about, again, like, what were the retailers looking to do? How are they feeling about their business? Who do they see as threats? And, obviously the likes of Amazon's, now that they owned Whole Foods, and others you can see were really, but there were some surprises as well. And what we focused our pitches were ultimately we're on the surprises, right? The surprises. Surprisingly, retailers are worried about these things, excited about these things, and planning not to do things like this anymore. So we put some tension into it in that way. And really that headline, Beer Business Daily is one of the most influential, if not influential, trades in adult beverage. And that inside the mind of Ninja, we couldn't have written a better headline. We felt really lucky to get it. But that's exactly the story we're trying to tell. I mean, if I'm an independent retailer, I'm like, what do these guys know that I don't know? And so I got to get on Drizly and get access to that data that these guys have and the knowledge they have. And then finally, in terms of coverage, we had really strong results, not just in quantity, but in terms of quality, right? And I think as a judge too, I've judged a number of awards. It's not just quantity. It really is in its quality. And when we see, I'm sure Risa and Meredith would agree, feature coverage in that addendum, and that we saw that with the Adweek story, right? Meredith's story. that really is impact, right? And mentions are great too, like all that stuff, in great outlets, but did the client own any stories here, right? And I think that's a really big deal. It was happy ending, right? Of course, they did, store count did increase. There was a lot of attribution to what we had done, which is important, as we'd said. And I just want to really echo Risa in terms of how an entry reads and what it looks like and sounds like. Stay away from jargon. When we see Garner and Align and Hits, I mean, we can all talk that way internally, but it really turns me off. I mean, honestly, I think it's lazy. And I think really think about what you're writing. Again, as Risa said, like, take it to the toughest writer in your agency and like expect it to be chewed up. And you know what? We're also too close to the work ourselves as account members, right? So you need some objectivity, and so show it around and don't worry, it's going to get better. It may be, everybody's had that experience of, oh God, I thought it was great, and now, it's all marked up. But it's going to be for the better if you show it to the right people. And I think, and also finally, build a story. We're all storytellers, right? That may be a little bit jargony, but we are. And really make me want to read this, right? Like, maybe ask a few questions, pose a challenge. I mean, I think, Meredith had a great example. Like, you guys were backed up against a wall, and like, so you fought hard to get in, right? That was like a little bit of like true, it's got to be real, it's got to be true, but play off those tensions, make us want to root for you, so that's about it.
Thank you, Rob. So here's just, again, some of the feedback. And Meredith or Risa, if you happen to provide any feedback just from a judge's perspective, we'd love to hear it. As we mentioned, Drizzly, Rob, and the 360 PR Plus team won the Super Bell last year for that award. So if there's any standard to kind of look over as we kind of wrap up or as you enter your submissions, that's definitely the high standard for last year. So any feedback from the other two guys?
I think one thing that...
Go ahead, Meredith.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
One thing that I think this campaign did a great job of that I always look for when I'm judging submissions is the strategy and planning section. So often I see the strategy listed as a bunch of tactics, but what I loved about this was that the strategy was a real strategy. It was taking the challenge, evaluating what you needed to do to get to the outcome and achieve the objectives. And it wasn't just, conducting research, it was understanding the business challenge, the audience, the opportunity, and then, executing that through a series of tactical activities. But they really laid out a much more strategic plan. And that's something I always look for. And I think this one did an exemplary job of.
Risa?
I definitely agree. I have very similar input. As Meredith, the one thing that I was sort of thinking about as we presented these two case studies, and depending on those who are listening in, who are considering submitting, and then anyone that's going to be listening to the recording, is that, in each category, you may have an entry that's hitting a bit more of a consumer audience versus a B2B audience. So, to like Meredith's earlier point, when you're sort of thinking about, should I submit it? Should I not submit it? Like, this wasn't GMA, this was Adweek. We take all of that into due consideration. So, we understand the nuance if you're in a high tech, if you're in the high tech industry versus the consumer industry. So, don't be hesitant to put your submission forward. As judges and as a judging team, we sort of can read between what's sort of like a shiny and exciting consumer type of program versus, and this has nothing to do with, this was an outstanding submission. So this is not specific. I was just taking the moment to make this point. But don't be reticent to present your submission or think, oh God, who's going to care about security technology, or who's going to care about cloud storage? Like, we look at each category, and some of these categories have, you might have entrants from all different industries, but the same advice, follows through. I am so sorry. He is so loud.
I just want to add, sorry.
he's 15 pounds soaking wet, by the way. So it's not like he's an attack dog or protecting me here.
There's just one point I wanted to make. You might see the second bullet here about wanting more documentation of results in terms of media clips. Make sure that, look at the full submission form, because we do look at supplemental materials, or supporting materials is what we call them. And they are important to show the judges more color and context than what you can necessarily put into these slides. So think about how you're presenting those supporting materials as well to really showcase the full breadth of it. As I think, I'm not sure if it was Risa or Meredith said, don't wait until the last minute and then just throw a bunch of stuff into one document and call that your supporting materials. Really think through how can that further expand on your story for those judges, because they read through everything.
So true.
Yeah.
Any other feedback? Otherwise, I think we'll kind of, I want to make sure we leave enough time for questions for everybody. So,
Yeah.
So do you guys have any, so these are the 5 criteria that I think Amy touched upon earlier, in which all of this submissions get judged. Do you 3 have any comments about any of the feedback, some things you like to see preferable in the situation analysis, maybe some things in terms of the results, anything that you want to touch upon in any of these categories for folks to really look on and focus on as they submit?
I would say, I think Risa and Meredith covered a lot of it. I think the situation analysis is very, very important, because that is really where you're making the case. I think the first slide and the last slide, right? Everything's important, but are you setting your entry up for success, right? Are you talking about and previewing the success you had and casting it in a bigger business context? I would say use that slide and think about the entry as a business case and not a PR case. Starting from that slide, that sets the tone for. And I have to be honest, probably, and you guys would agree, and I hate to prejudice myself based on one slide, but you kind of know, you're getting a sense already in that first slide. Okay, is this one or is this one? Okay, so.
Yeah, I think on that point, the situation analysis, it's such a short word count. It's like, is that really the meat of this? Does it really matter? But to Rob's point, it does. And one of my pet peeves is that I see so much repetition, oftentimes across entries in each of these 5 or 4 entry points, and really trying to make them distinct. The situation analysis isn't just restating the objectives, it's painting that bigger picture. It's in a very clear, concise way, and then leaving something new for us to read in the objectives, and so on and so forth. So yeah, make each bit flow as a story, but separate in its own right.
And it's a place where you can put some context in, right? So like, what 2 things do you need the judge to know about your client's business that were important? I mean, we'll see this about COVID left and right this year, but put that aside. I mean, everybody knows that's the context. And I wouldn't lean too hard on overdoing it with COVID this year too. That's one thing I would say. Everybody's in the same boat, folks. So if you think like that you've been heroic just because you dealt with COVID, so welcome to the world, right? But I think, letting sort of like what made this even harder, right, can start to win over a judge.
Mm-hmm.
That's some great feedback. Risa, did you have anything to add? No pressure, honestly. I was just wanted to make sure we incorporated any feedback.
I think Rob and Meredith, yeah.
Sure, no problem.
Open it for any questions.
Yeah, so I can't see the chat, but I'm assuming there's hopefully some questions in the chat. Amy, if you wanted to pop up or.
Yeah, no questions just yet, but if any of our attendees have specific questions, you can put them in the question and answer section. You can put them in the chat, we'll get them. So we'll be happy to answer your specific questions for you. One thing I'll mention while you're thinking about that, we do have 2 COVID categories this year. So to Rob's point, yeah, we because we know that has affected everybody so much, we wanted to just sort of steer those into those 2 particular categories. So you'll see that when you check out the categories. And just one more tip in general, you make sure you read those category descriptions really carefully, because they're some of the questions that we get from judges are is this right for this particular category? It doesn't really match the category description. And then if I say, well, yes, it does, then the judge is like, okay. And you already, I'm like, gosh, you know, we've prejudiced this campaign already. So really make sure it's a good fit for the categories that you're selecting. We have so many categories. We've simplified some this year. We've expanded on a couple of other new areas. So definitely take a look at that. Allison asked the question in the chat, is there an ideal number of slides we should submit? Is short and sweet better? And Meredith definitely replied, shorter is better. We have a lot to read through. And I'll just point you, we have a template. I think we'll talk about this in our last tips at the end when we close, but we do have a template presentation. It's ugly as all heck. It's just bare bones, but it basically says, like, you know, here, use this and this slide to tell your situation, and it gives you a couple prompts and things. So we're recommending keeping it to 8 slides. Would be great. Rob, what were you going to add?
And I would add to that too. You know, think about showing and not just telling, right? That'll help keep your words down. So think about the images that you use on those slides. Don't make it a masthead form on every slide, because it's just, we're going to wash over it. And in fact, you know, just think about how you use that. There's always the supplemental materials, but like, what other things can help illustrate the story that you're telling of that within that entry?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a really important point. And at this point, I think if you have more questions, please submit them. But why don't we just go to our last tip for those of you? We really, as I said before, you know, we have a lot of material. What we try to do every year, and I'll pass this over to Jen for a second. I'll just add a little historical context. You know, every year as we go through this process, we keep track of all of the questions that we get. We keep track of how we're answering them. And we do a lot of debriefs as we go through this process. And every year we're incorporating that into the platform and to our supporting pages. So Jen, I'll turn it over to you.
Sure, thanks. So thank you everyone for kind of sticking around, and for Rob and Meredith and Rissa for joining us. But I just want to put in some 5 key things that we thought are essential for everyone as you kind of go through and start really kind of crunching down what components you want to put into your submission. So first and foremost, study the guidelines page. If you go to the PR Club website and the Bell Ringers website, there's a clear guidelines that tells what should go into entries, as Amy mentioned, and kind of what we're looking for, what categories and such, and just kind of make sure you look that over so that make sure you're not, because we don't want to disqualify anybody for not following the guidelines. That's the worst thing we could possibly ever want to do. So you want to make sure you stick into that and stay with it. As Amy mentioned, we have a sample template, and also use this recording. We're going to have this recording available to everyone. So even if you weren't able to join, or some of your colleagues weren't able to join, please share it with them and use it as a resource as you kind of go through and start compiling all your information. Again, just a reminder, as we mentioned in the beginning, when you're collecting all of your materials, Amy mentioned we have the supporting materials within the entry form, but make sure that you get that secure submissions and clearance from your clients for any information that you're putting in. We'd want to like showcase the winners in any fashion that we could, so we hate for any kind of redacting that we would have to do, but obviously we understand. So just make sure that you get that clearance as you go through. Use your real estate wisely. You have these 8 to 9 pages. Make it concise, as Meredith said, and just kind of tell your story, as Rob and everyone else alluded to. This is what you do. You're practitioners, you're storytellers. So be creative, but also show why that you think that all your hard work for not only your agency, yourself, but your client and your organization as well deserves all of these awards. We want to make sure that that's celebrated and it's showcased. This is your time. It's your moment to really tell the world everything you did for the past 12 months or even longer in some cases. So be the storyteller. So on that note, I will hand over any final comments from Rob, Meredith, or Rissa. If not, we'll close out if there's no other questions.
I think we're good on the question front.
Awesome.
Yeah, nothing from me. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you, guys.
Good luck to everyone.
Good luck to all of our entrants, and thank you, Erin, for organizing this, and thank you, Rob and Meredith and Risa as well from me too. And thanks for our attendees and for watching our recording.